What if I told you that some of the world's most iconic cities owe their fame not to culture, commerce, or innovation, but to bloodshed? From ancient battlefields to modern warfare, these 12 cities became legendary because of the wars fought within their walls. Some were destroyed and rebuilt, others became symbols of resistance, and a few, well, they changed the course of human history entirely. By the end of this video, you'll never look at these places the same way again. Let's dive in. 1. Troy, ancient Turkey, the Trojan War, circa 1200 BCE. We're starting with the OG war city, Troy. For centuries, people thought this place was just a myth from Homer's Iliad, but then archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann actually found it in modern-day Turkey in the 1870s. The legendary 10-year siege, the Trojan horse Helen of Troy. Whether it all happened exactly as the stories say, we'll never know. But what's undeniable is that this war gave us one of humanity's greatest epic poems and made Troy immortal. Without this conflict, Troy would just be another forgotten ancient settlement. But Troy's fame comes from legends and poetry. Our next city, its war was documented with brutal precision. 2. Carthage, Tunisia, the Punic Wars, 264 to 146 BCE. Carthage was once Rome's greatest rival, a maritime superpower that controlled trade across the Mediterranean. Then came the Punic Wars, and one name still echoes through history: Hannibal. He crossed the Alps with war elephants, won battle after battle, and terrorized Rome for over a decade. But Rome doesn't forgive. After the Third Punic War, they didn't just defeat Carthage, they erased it. The city was burned, the population enslaved, and according to legend, salt was poured into the earth so nothing would ever grow there again. Carthage became famous as the city that defied Rome and paid the ultimate price. Rome knew how to hold grudges, but centuries later, another city would face an enemy just as ruthless. 3. Constantinople. Istanbul, Turkey, fall to the Ottomans, 1453. For over 1,000 years, Constantinople was the jewel of the Byzantine Empire, the bridge between East and West, seemingly unconquerable behind its legendary triple walls. But in 1453, a 21-year-old Ottoman sultan named Mehmed II had other plans. He brought massive cannons, dragged ships overland to bypass the harbor defenses, and laid siege for 53 days. When the walls finally fell, it marked the end of the Roman Empire and the beginning of the Ottoman Age. Constantinople became Istanbul, and its fall sent shockwaves that literally helped trigger the Renaissance in Europe. One battle, one city, the end of an era. That siege changed history, but our next city became famous for surviving what should have been impossible. 4. Stalingrad, Volgograd, Russia. Battle of Stalingrad, 1942 to 1943. Stalingrad. Even the name sounds like iron and blood. This was Hitler's obsession, a city named after Stalin himself. The battle lasted 5 months and became the deadliest in human history. Over 2 million casualties. Soldiers fighting room to room, floor by floor, sometimes for a single building. The average life expectancy of a Soviet soldier here? 24 hours. But the Soviets held, and when they finally encircled the German Sixth Army, it marked the turning point of World War II. Stalingrad didn't just survive, it broke the back of the Nazi war machine. The city was renamed Volgograd in 1961, but its wartime name is the one history remembers. Stalingrad's resistance defined an entire war, but what about a city that became famous for being completely destroyed? 5. Hiroshima. Japan. Atomic bombing, 1945. August 6th, 1945, 8:15 a.m. One bomb. One city. Everything changed. Hiroshima became the first city in history to be attacked with a nuclear weapon. In an instant, 80,000 people were gone. By the end of the year, the death toll reached 140,000. 3 days later, Nagasaki faced the same fate. These two attacks ended World War II and ushered in the atomic age, a new era where humanity possessed the power to destroy itself. Today, Hiroshima stands as a symbol of peace and a warning. The atomic dome remains exactly as it was that day, a UNESCO World Heritage Site reminding us of the cost of war. Hiroshima represents the dawn of the nuclear age, but centuries earlier, another city became famous through a siege that lasted almost a decade. 6. Orleans, France. Siege of Orleans, 1428 to 1429. Orleans, 1428. The English have France on the ropes during the 100 Years' War. They've laid siege to this strategic city on the Loire River. If Orleans falls, France falls. Enter a 17-year-old peasant girl who claims God sent her to save France. Joan of Arc rallied the French troops, broke the siege in just 9 days, and turned the tide of the entire war. Orleans became the symbol of French resistance, and Joan became a legend and later a saint. Without this battle, we might be speaking English in Paris today. Joan of Arc became a legend at Orleans, but our next city's name became synonymous with the horrors of trench warfare. 7. Verdun, France, Battle of Verdun, 1916. Verdun, the longest battle of World War I, February to December 1916, 10 months of pure hell. The German strategy was simple and horrifying. Bleed France white. Attack a city the French would defend at all costs, then kill so many soldiers that France would collapse. They almost succeeded. By the end, 700,000 men were dead or wounded. The landscape around Verdun still bears the scars. So many shells fell that the ground looks like the surface of the moon. France held, barely, and Verdun became their symbol of determination. Ils ne passeront pas, they shall not pass. The battle achieved almost nothing strategically, but made Verdun eternally famous as the face of WWI's senseless carnage. World War I redefined warfare. But our next city became legendary for withstanding one of history's most brutal sieges. 8. Leningrad, St. Petersburg, Russia. Siege of Leningrad, 1941 to 1944. 872 days. That's how long Nazi forces surrounded Leningrad, trying to starve the city into surrender. No supplies, no food. Temperatures dropping to minus 30 degrees Celsius. People ate wallpaper paste, leather, sawdust. Over 1 million civilians died, most from starvation. But they never surrendered. Shostakovich composed his 7th Symphony during the siege, and it was performed in the city while shells were still falling. The siege of Leningrad showed the absolute extremes of human endurance and suffering. When it finally ended in 1944, the city had become a symbol of Soviet resilience that propaganda would celebrate for decades. Leningrad's siege lasted years, but some cities become famous from battles that last just days or even hours. 9. Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, USA, Battle of Gettysburg, 1863. 3 days in July, 1863. A small Pennsylvania town became the site of the Civil War's bloodiest battle and its turning point. 50,000 casualties. The Confederacy, led by General Robert E. Lee, pushed north in their boldest invasion attempt. Union forces held the high ground. On the 3rd day, Lee ordered pickets charge, a massive frontal assault that became a slaughter. The Confederacy never recovered. 4 months later, Lincoln delivered the Gettysburg Address on the battlefield, redefining the war as a fight for human freedom. A small town became hallowed ground and a symbol of the fight to preserve the Union. Gettysburg was 3 days, but our next city suffered through a siege that lasted 3 long years. 10. Sarajevo, Bosnia. Siege of Sarajevo, 1992 to 1996. Sarajevo already had a place in history. It's where Franz Ferdinand was assassinated, triggering World War I. But in the 1990s, it became famous for another war entirely. During the breakup of Yugoslavia, Bosnian Serb forces surrounded Sarajevo for 1,425 days. The longest siege of a capital city in modern warfare. Civilians were targeted by snipers and shelling daily. Sniper Alley became a deadly gauntlet just to get food. Over 11,000 people died. The siege showed the world that genocide and ethnic cleansing weren't just history. They were happening in Europe while CNN broadcast it live. Sarajevo became a symbol of civilian suffering in modern war. Sarajevo's suffering was televised around the world. But our next city? It became an ideological battleground during the Cold War. 11. Berlin, Germany. Battle of Berlin, 1945. And the Cold War. Berlin became famous for not one, but two wars. First, the Battle of Berlin in 1945, the final showdown of World War II in Europe. Soviet forces surrounded the city, and the fighting was apocalyptic. Hitler killed himself in his bunker. The Nazi regime ended. But Berlin's story didn't end there. The city was divided between East and West, becoming the epicenter of the Cold War. The Berlin Wall became the physical symbol of the Iron Curtain. When it fell in 1989, it didn't just reunite a city, it marked the end of the Cold War itself. Berlin is the city that bookended the 20th century's greatest conflicts. Berlin defined the 20th century's conflicts, but our final city became famous for a war that America still hasn't fully reconciled with. 12. Saigon Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. Fall of Saigon, 1975. Saigon, April 30th, 1975. North Vietnamese tanks crashed through the gates of the presidential palace. Helicopters evacuated the last Americans from the embassy rooftop in chaos. South Vietnam fell. The war was over. Those images of helicopters and desperate evacuations became the defining pictures of American defeat, the end of a conflict that killed millions and divided a nation. Saigon was renamed Ho Chi Minh City, but its wartime name remains etched in American memory as the symbol of the Vietnam War's tragic conclusion. It's a reminder that not every war ends with victory parades. 12 cities, 12 wars. Some of these places were completely destroyed. Others survived against impossible odds. But all of them were transformed by violence into something more than just locations on a map. They became symbols, lessons, and warnings carved into human memory. War didn't just shape these cities, it immortalized them. Which of these cities surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments. If you learned something today, hit that like button and subscribe for more history content. And remember, these cities are still here, still thriving, still telling their stories. Maybe they're worth a visit. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.